Welcome back to Everyday Economics. The podcast helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, CEO of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can subscribe to all of our podcasts at americastalking.com. To support Everyday Economics, please make a tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We are recording this episode on Friday, July 12th. And joining me as always, Dr. Orphe Divounguy, PhD economist. Dr. O, something that we don't often talk about is the cost of the debt that we incur to operate the federal government. I think it's an important thing for us to pause and to take a look at every so often. The Peter G. Peterson Foundation keeps a very close watch on this, and I know that this is data and analysis that you like to spend time with.
I think they do a great job. I think they do a fantastic job of keeping track of the country's fiscal challenges. And they just looked at the latest CBO projections, and it's mind-blowing.
So let me lay that out. This is from the report on July 2nd. So, I mean, this is just recent information. The CBO projects that interest costs in 2024 will total $892 billion, a jump of 36% from the previous year, and following increases of 35 and 38% in each of the 2 years before that. So what does that mean to the person who's listening to us?
And let me start with, is this normal? Is it normal for the federal government to spend that kind of money, right, on interest? And basically, the interest cost depends on the size of the debt, but also the interest rate. And as interest rates remain high for longer, right, you see those yields on treasury yields remaining very high. The cost that the federal government pays on its debt also increases. Relative to the size of the economy, which I think is a good benchmark, interest rate costs would reach 3.4% of GDP in 2025 and could climb up to 4.1% of GDP by 2034. When you compare the cost relative to federal revenues, right? So like what we're spending as a share of our kind of what you could call income, revenue from collecting taxes and all that stuff, the federal government would have interest payments rise to 20.3% of federal revenues by 2025, exceeding the previous high of 18.4% set in 1991. Essentially, it hasn't been this high since 1991, right? And I will have everybody remember that after 1991, by the way, the only times that we've had these types of numbers, that we faced these types of numbers were in times where the debt really increased a lot, our fiscal deficits increased a lot because we were either in a recession or because we were at war or something like that, right? Or both. And basically, look, back in 1991, I would like everybody to remember that in the 90s, there was a real effort by the federal government, by the President of the United States and Congress to reduce the debt. And we got to a point where the administration at the time managed, right? The administration, with the help of Congress and everybody concerned about the debt, they managed to balance the government budget. And I think that was the highlight maybe of the Clinton presidency, right? But everybody really took to it. It was and made the effort, right? To make sure that we don't remain on what we thought at the time was an unsustainable path. Today, it's the opposite. Nobody seems to care that we're basically on this unsustainable debt path.
Let me, for the benefit of the people that are listening, let me try to articulate sort of, the amount of interest. And I'm going to pull from the Peterson Foundation's chart from 2023. But to put this into some kind of context of the amount of money that we're spending on interest on debt, last year in fiscal year 2023, interest cost on the national debt totaled $658 billion. Okay, so we're trending to be well above that this year if we come in at 892 per the CBO's estimate. In terms of other government spending, the amount that we're spending on interest It dwarfs what we're spending on Medicaid. It dwarfs what we're spending on children. It is more than double what we're spending on veterans programs. It is a vast multiple of what we're spending on, quote unquote, international affairs.
8-9 times. 8-9 times.
And natural resources and the environment, which is less than $100 billion a year. It's actually probably more like 40.
Yeah. So if you're concerned about things like climate change, if you're concerned about things like education spending, you have to be concerned that basically this amount of interest paid on debt is basically going to crowd out the spending on the things that actually matter to you and I.
So to further dial this in, when we're talking about interest payments that the federal government makes, to whom or to what are these interest payments made?
Well, I mean, that's a very good point. They're made to the people who lend money to the U.S. government. And those lenders happen to be some Americans, but also, right, foreigners. And so that is also part of, right. So, I guess the good side of this whole thing is that this money goes to in large part to Americans, savers. Who are those savers? Who holds most of the wealth in this country? Older Americans with their money, basically, who buy these bonds, these government bonds. And we will rely on those government bonds for income into retirement, into old age. And so I think that's the good news. The bad news is that it's not spread evenly, right? And there's huge wealth inequality in this country. And so I think that's something that to keep in mind.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts as always. Those numbers are staggering. We'll get back together again soon. For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other quality podcasts at americastalking.com.